Hello, welcome to True Time Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and today I'm going to be doing a video, or more like an audio, on Emma Borden, the sister of Lizzie Borden, as a suspect in the Lizzie Borden case. A lot of people think Emma Borden was in on the murders of Lizzie and her father and stepmother. Some people think that she actually committed the murders herself without Lizzie's help, and some of them think maybe they were like co-conspirators in the murders. I personally don't think that Emma Borden was there at the house at the time of the murders. I do believe that she was away visiting. But there's some people who think that she like pretended to go out of town or went out of town but came back to commit the murders and then left again. One writer of a book about this case, let's see, his name was Frank Spearing, and he wrote the book Lizzie, the Story of Lizzie Borden, and that book was first published in 1984. His theory is that Emma is the killer, that Emma came home from the trip that she took to Fairhaven and axed her father and stepmother to death. His theory involves that Emma and Lizzie were not co-conspirators, but that they each were plotting separately to kill their parents. So I find that kind of hard to believe that at the same time or around the same time that Lizzie and her sister were plotting separately to kill their parents, but they each didn't know what the other was doing. I find that hard to believe. So that's one reason I don't buy into his particular theory. So he thinks that Emma comes home with an axe, that she already had an axe, and that Lizzie realizes what Emma's going to do. And so Lizzie then decides to help her. So in other words, like Lizzie didn't know that Emma wanted to kill their parents until Emma snuck home from her trip that she was supposed to be in Fairhaven, but she snuck back home with an axe to kill her parents. And then Lizzie saw what she was doing or going to do, and so Lizzie decided to get in on it. So I think that theory is kind of far-fetched, so that's another reason why I don't buy into it. Another reason Frank Spearing gave for his theory was that Emma's trip to Fairhaven was odd, or that she must have used it as a ruse for an alibi to kill her parents, because he thought that it was odd for Emma, who was 40, 41 at the time of her trip to Fairhaven. Forget if she was 40, 41, 42, but anyway, she was in her early 40s. He thought it was odd that she was going to visit a friend who was 24. And he thought the trip was only to provide Emma with an alibi. In other words, he didn't think that a 40-ish-year-old woman would go visit, take a trip, and spend time with a 24-year-old woman. So that was part of his theory. But there's an author named Leonard Rabello, and he wrote in his book, Lizzie Borden, Past and Present, that Emma was visiting Helen Brownell, who was 54 years old. So Frank Spearing thought Emma was visiting a 24-year-old named Jenny Brownell, but author Leonard Rabello thought Emma was visiting Helen Brownell, a 54 years old. Well, to my thinking, it doesn't matter who Emma went to visit. I don't think that she came back to commit the murders, in my opinion. But some people think that she did actually was physically there. She came back to commit the murders or help Lizzie commit the murders, or that she at least knew about the murders, and that she went away on purpose so she wouldn't be there when Lizzie committed the murders, but she knew that the murders were going to take place. That's, people have different theories of how involved they think Emma was in the murders. I personally don't think that Emma physically was there at the house at the time of the murders. Now, it's whether or not she knew about the murders before they were going to take place or after. I'm not real sure, so that's what I hope to get into in this video. I mean, I'm thinking at some point in Emma's life she realized that Emma did murder their parents, but I'm not sure if it was like soon after Lizzie committed the crime, or I think Lizzie committed the crime, but Lizzie was not convicted, or if it was like later in life when like Emma left Lizzie and never saw her again. Like, did Lizzie confess it to her, or did Emma just realize that something was off with Lizzie, or did they get in an argument and Lizzie just told her? Or was Emma scared of Lizzie because Lizzie said they got in an argument of some type, and Lizzie said, "I'll do to you what I did to father and stepmother," or something like that. I mean, who knows? So, because we don't have all the facts of this case or all the evidence in this case because it happened so long ago, and it's not like we have videotapes or audio tapes of evidence that we can listen to know exactly what was said between them two before and after the murders and throughout their lives. So anyway, I think Frank Spearing's theory about Emma being there is not correct. I don't buy into that theory. And I also don't think it's particularly odd that Emma went to visit a 24-year-old or a 54-year-old or any woman of any age or anybody. I mean, visiting today and back then was a common thing for, people to go visit each other. I don't think a 40-year-old woman visiting someone in their 20s was odd, and I don't think so. Even if Frank Spearing is correct that she went to visit a woman in her 20s, I don't think that's anything. But if he's wrong, she went to visit a 54-year-old woman and not a 24-year-old woman anyway. Or maybe she went to visit the whole family, both of these ladies. So anyway, so people think that Emma and Lizzie had hatred for their father and stepmother, which I totally agree with, or some animosity between them. But it doesn't mean that, a lot of people go through phases or periods or their whole lives hating their parents or a step parent, but it doesn't mean that they would want to kill them or have the nerve or the desire to actually want to kill them. But Emma was old enough to know her biological mother. What was she? She was 12, I think, around the age of 12, maybe a little bit older when her biological mother died. So Emma was, of course, probably devastated by her mother's death, and she probably was very loyal to her mother's memory. And so a lot of times when the new step parent comes into the family, a child will resent that parent and think they're trying to take the place of their biological mother or biological father, and they resent that parent, and they will, not be agreeable to that parent. They will go against that parent, be angry at that parent, or resent their father or their mother for bringing in somebody else to who they feel like replace their other parent who has died. So I think the issue with Emma was that she was old enough when her mother died to know her mother very well. So when her father brought the new lady around, Abby, and they got married, Emma resented her greatly. Like a lot of kids and, teenagers especially would resent. So Emma took over, due to her loyalty to her mother. She didn't want Abby to be like the mother figure for her or her little sister Lizzie. And so she took over the mothering role and the parent role of her little sister Lizzie. She, she always said that she took care of her from the time their mother died until, she grew up, that like Lizzie was like Emma's own child. Two things that Emma and Lizzie had in common was that they never got married. Some people think that might be a sign that they were possibly abused as children. by their father. And so, like, they had like a hatred possibly of men and didn't want to be around men or get married to men, which is possible. Some abused children, will maybe hate or not trust the sex of the person who abused them. Some people may go, totally the opposite way and become promiscuous and act out in ways, like that if they're abused. So I'm not going to get into all of that. To me, there's no evidence of any abuse of any type, physical or sexual. Um, so I'm not going to get into that as part of my theory, but only to say it is possible, but there's just no proof of it. So I'm not going to get into that. I will say, a lot of people think for a child, let's just pretend like Lizzie or Emma was involved in the murders, and one or both of them, and they, people think that there has to be a really good reason. There has to be a lot of hatred for a child to want to murder their parents and to carry it out. To take a hatchet or an axe and, bludgeon somebody to death with it, hack them to death is, a big deal. It's not something that just anybody would do. So people think that somebody doing something like that would have to have a lot of hatred for that person. And so people think that's why Mr. Borden and Abby Borden ended up dead, was that, let's say if Lizzie or Emma did it, that they had a lot of hatred because they were abused children. And their anger just came out and they took it out, one or both of them took it out on their parents. But remember, they killed the stepmother and the father. If they just had anger toward their dad because he was like a pervert and abused them, why did they also kill Abby? Well, people say because Abby was there, or Abby was, knew about the abuse or stuff like that. But I don't think people understand that, if somebody is like a psychopath or extremely narcissistic, that they don't have to have a lot of anger or a really good reason to kill somebody. People, we know this in society, people kill people all the time for not much of any reason. People kill for $5,000, people kill for $5 million, and people will kill for $5. People kill other people for all kinds of reasons that don't rise to any level that we think that they should. Like, some people think, if somebody kills somebody for $5 million, well, that's understandable. $5 million at stake. That's worth killing somebody. And some people think that, but they look at like somebody killing for 5,000 or $5, $50, whatever. Like, that's over the top. That's extreme. That they must have had another motive. There must have been some other reason. They wouldn't just kill somebody for that little amount of money. But people kill for all kinds of silly reasons that don't make sense to us. And especially if, let's say, Lizzie committed these murders. If she was a psychopath, well, she doesn't have a conscience anyway, so it's not like a big deal to her to hack up her dad and her stepmom. It's not like something that she was going to feel guilty about. Like, it didn't hinder her from just getting her inheritance and living out the rest of her life. So I don't think that there has to be a real, for Lizzie or Emma or both of them to have killed their parents doesn't necessarily mean that they had to have been severely abused or traumatized by their father or their stepmother in their lives to make them want or to have the ability to be able to kill them in such a brutal way. But my theory, and I've discussed this in a previous video, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but I do think that Lizzie Borden committed the murders or is the best suspect, even though she was found not guilty by a jury at the time. I think it's just very logical and common sensical that she makes the best suspect because she was there and she had odd behaviors. There's some evidence, if it's true, that she tried to buy poison from the drugstore, that she, was plotting, planning, premeditating to kill her father and stepmother. And we know that like three of the main reasons for murder, three of the top reasons that people kill other people are greed, which means, money, inheritance. So greed, revenge, or sex. And I don't think, unlike some people, if you believe that she was abused, think that, excuse me, that sex was the reason. Obviously, she killed her father and her stepmother. She wasn't like in some relationship with a guy and killed, a lover who scorned her, whatever. She killed her parents. And what's like a main reason that people want to kill their parents is inheritance, money. Even today, when you hear of adult children living with their parents who kill them, they get in fights about money, about maybe the parents want the child to leave the home and the child doesn't want to, get out and support themselves, and they end up murdering their parents. So money, greed is a big motivator for murder. And if you have a lack of conscience, it's very easy to carry out a plan to murder whoever's inhibiting your getting what you want. And there's a YouTube channel called Pat Brown Criminal Profiler. She did a video on the Lizzie Borden case, and a lot of the things she said in her video I agree with, and I'll put a link down below this video so you can listen to what she has to say, because she comes at it from a criminal profiler perspective, and she analyzes evidence and facts and, what we know about the case, as best we can know about this case, since we don't have, all the evidence, and, we weren't there during the time. But she said some things, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of the things she said. I'm not giving exact quotes because I didn't write down the exact quotes, but so part of her theories, or what she analyzed about this case, was that Emma Borden and Bridget Sullivan, the maid, were the only two people in the house, in and around the house at the time of the murders. So it has to be one or both of them. And I'm going to talk about the maid, Bridget Sullivan, in another video. So today I'm just going to focus on Emma. But Pat Brown, the criminal profiler's video about this case, she, rules out other suspects because she says that it only makes sense that one or both of them would be the suspects or the killers in this case because they were there in the house. And that if like a random killer just came off the street, there'd be like a blood trail or other evidence, eyewitnesses. And so her theory is that Lizzie and the maid, like Lizzie carried out the murders, but the maid probably knew about it. So her comments made a lot of sense to me, because I always felt like, Lizzie did it, but I wasn't sure about if other people had involvement. Like, I'm not sure about if Emma knew about it or if the maid knew about it, but it makes sense that the maid would have to know about it because she was there in the house at the time. Emma was away visiting friends. So I don't believe Emma Borden was physically there. So I don't think that Emma Borden committed the actual murders in any physical way. And I thought about it, but I don't think that Emma knew the murders were going to take place. Some theories are that Emma left because she knew what Lizzie was going to be doing. And she was okay with it, but she didn't want no part of it. Like Lizzie was, the psychopathic, cold-blooded one. So she's, you just go away and I'll handle this. But I don't necessarily believe that Emma Borden knew what was going to take place when she left. Now, there are some people who think that Emma Borden seemed or didn't seem grief-stricken in her testimony that she gave about the killing of her father and stepmother. They kind of felt like she was like cold, like Lizzie, like her demeanor, her personality was cold like Lizzie's when she was questioned by District Attorney Hosea Knowlton. And also when she was questioned, she said, "I don't know," many times while being questioned. So some people take that as her being evasive. Maybe when she didn't know about it before she left to go visit her friends, but when she came home, maybe she knew or had a feeling. Maybe she knew something was off with Lizzie. Maybe she thought that Lizzie was involved in killing their parents, or she just knew it. Maybe Lizzie told her after she came home. And so she just lied to protect her so that they could get their inheritance and go on with their lives. But I'm not so sure, because think about it. If Lizzie, Emma might have been, like loyal to Lizzie, and she may not have been a psychopath. So she had compassion and she had a conscience and she felt, compassion for her sister. Nobody wants their family member to go to prison or be hung. And Lizzie was all she had left after her parents died. She wasn't married, didn't have kids or nieces or nephews. So maybe Emma would lie for Lizzie. Maybe, she realized or was told by Lizzie that she did murder their parents, or she just knew that she murdered her parents, so she lied for her. But also you got to think, Emma would have been a lot better off if Lizzie had have went to the gallows, because Emma, to my understanding, Emma would have got the full inheritance instead of just half. Instead of having to half it with Lizzie, Emma would have got the whole thing. But then again, if she's not a psychopath, she wouldn't want to do that. She wouldn't want to send her sister to be hung. She wouldn't want to be alone in the world. When with money, if you don't have family members, not everybody's all about money. She may have been upset with her father and stepmother for how, she wasn't living the life that she wanted to live. But I don't think Emma was as angry about it as Lizzie was. I know Emma probably hated her stepmother because when she was old enough to know her real mother, so she resented her probably all her life since Abby came into her life. But it doesn't necessarily mean that she would be willing to kill either one of them to get an inheritance earlier or to get money. So, I can't say whether I think Emma was involved. I mean, I know she wasn't physically involved, but whether she knew about it afterwards, and if she maybe lied while being questioned, like maybe she had suspicions about Lizzie, but she didn't know for sure. If she's like a regular person, a normal person, a good person, she just doesn't want to believe that. You don't want to believe that one of your relatives would murder your other relatives and hack them to death in such a violent way. Maybe she just couldn't fathom that. So maybe she wasn't trying to be evasive. She just honestly didn't know. So that's why she said, "I don't know," many times while being questioned about the murders. And also people saying that, well, she didn't seem grief-stricken or too upset about the deaths. Well, one, she could have been in shock. And also, back then, we don't have any audio of her voice. We can't hear the sound of her voice while she's testifying, and we can't see her. We don't have video of her testifying. We can't, or answering questions with the police or the district attorney. We don't know what her physical appearance and demeanor was, and we don't know how her voice sounded. When you read a transcript, it could come off sounding one way, but it's like when we send emails today, some people, you send an email, somebody might say, "Oh, that your email was awfully gruff or, rude or whatever," but you didn't mean it that way. It just, when people read an email, it may come off differently than you meant when you sent it. So when we read a transcript, since we can't hear a voice to go with it or see a video to see the person's demeanor, we don't really know how their voices sounding or how their demeanor is. So I wouldn't go by just reading her transcripts of her answers, because if there, I can say that there's no evidence that, I don't recall the district attorney Hosea Knowlton, when he's questioning her, accusing her of being evasive or anything, or like of her arguing with him. He just asked questions and she answered them. She did say, I don't know a lot, but maybe, if you read the court transcripts and other stuff about this case, if you know more than I do, but I don't recall there ever being like an argument or somebody accusing her of, not being truthful in her answers. Anyway, that I remember. I think it was more like Lizzie, and I think maybe Bridget Sullivan wasn't given the whole story, or their stories conflicted. But I don't recall Emma, at least in what I've read about on the transcripts, I don't recall Emma being accused by the district attorney or others while she was being questioned that she wasn't, coming up with truthful answers, or that she was being argumentative, or that she was extremely angry about being questioned, whatever and if she was somewhat, if she seemed evasive, whatever, it could just be the shock. Like, you go out of town and you come home, and if she didn't know anything about this until she heard about it, it's like, oh my God, my parents have been hacked to death, and now my sister is being accused, and now people are asking me questions. So it could just be the shock of it, because if she didn't know anything about it, that would be a very shocking thing. And who knows what was going on in her mind? Did she think, well, yeah, my little sister could have done that, or no, my little sister would never do nothing like that? Maybe she couldn't believe that her little sister would do something like that. Maybe she knew her sister did do that. Who knows? We can't, get into her mind. So I don't see people saying that her demeanor was off while she was being questioned as being evidence to say that she was involved in the murder. So in other words, I don't have any clear evidence that she was involved. When I say involved, I mean that she knew about the murders either before or after they happened. So I don't see any clear evidence that she has any guilt in this. Do I think she was probably angry at her father over financial stuff? Yes. But do I think that she's the one who physically murdered them? No. And do I know that she was in on it as a conspirator, that either before or after, Lizzie confided in her? No. Do I think it's possible later on in life she knew? Yes. Because they did separate later in life, and to my understanding, they never spoke to each other again. Did Emma fear her sister Lizzie? Or was she angry at Lizzie because Lizzie confessed, or she just knew that Lizzie did kill their parents and she was angry about it? Maybe she finally realized, well, yes, Lizzie did do that. Or was she fearful of Lizzie? Did Lizzie threaten her some way? Was she fearful what happened to her parents could happen to her because she realized that something was off or wrong about Lizzie? Lizzie was a psychopath. I'm sure she didn't think about it in that word back then. Maybe she thought, oh my God, my sister's evil. That's probably how she would have thought about it back then, if she was ended up being scared of her sister. So I don't think at the time of trial that she was scared of her sister, because if she was, she wouldn't have. If she thought that she had done something, she would have spoke up, because she wouldn't want Lizzie to be out of jail. She wouldn't want her to be around her anymore. And they actually, lived together and still, hung out together for a long time. So I don't think she knew to be afraid of Lizzie during that time. But later on, I think maybe for some reason she was. So basically, to sum it up, because I know I've rambled in this video, it's hard for me to explain why I don't think that Emma Borden was involved in the murders, although, I'm not 100% sure, obviously, as you can tell, because I'm not like being matter of fact. One thing I personally, in my opinion, and I know a lot of people don't agree, but in my opinion, I do believe that Lizzie Borden was involved in the murders, that Lizzie Borden physically committed the murders. Just, I'm not exactly sure who, if anybody else knew about it or was involved in it or, helped her, conspired with her. But so in my opinion, I'm 100% Lizzie Borden was involved in the murders. But like as far as Emma Borden, I'm 100% convinced she didn't physically commit the murders or wasn't physically there when the murders took place. But as far as her knowing about the murders, before or after, long after, I'm not sure. I lean towards she didn't know that the murders were going to take place before they happened, because I just don't think she necessarily would have allowed Lizzie to do such a thing without trying to stop her. And, like during Lizzie's trial or right after the murders, I don't necessarily think that Emma knew. Family members might have a feeling, but to actually go there and believe in your mind that your sister could do something like that, maybe she just couldn't do that. Maybe Lizzie didn't tell her that she had did that, so she wouldn't really have a reason to believe that Lizzie did that. And that through the trial, I think maybe, unless she just covered for her sister because, she was loyal to her sister and loved her sister, I think during the trial she was basically honest, and answered the questions truthfully. She may have had feelings, but she didn't let her feelings dictate what she thought about Lizzie committing the murders. Maybe she just couldn't go there. And, back in that time, and that's just, you wouldn't want to, it would be embarrassing or, it'd be too much for her to admit that, yeah, my sister killed my parents in such a heinous way, because, back then they didn't even think that women could or would do something that heinous. And I think that's one of the main reasons why Lizzie was found not guilty. But so I don't think Emma was involved physically with the murders. And I think maybe she didn't know about the murders until long after. Like maybe she didn't know that Lizzie had actually committed the murders until long after, when her and Lizzie lived together and she just realized it or whatever. There's some interesting things about Emma Borden later in life. And I believe, when she left Lizzie, they stopped living together and Emma got a house somewhere else. There's stories I've read that Emma, like she was very safety conscious, that she was very into having good lighting in her home, and that she had like a master switch in her room, in her bedroom, or the room that she stayed in, to be able to turn all the lights on at one time in the house, and the outside lights. So she's very into safety. Now, was that just a thing back then? That's what people did? Or did she have some kind of fear? Now, her parents were murdered, so obviously that, could put fear into somebody. Was all her safety conscious things that she did later in life, and she was, became a bit reclusive. Was that because, in other words, did she stay home a lot because she had fear of going out to society, because she just feared there's a vicious killer on the loose out there? Or did she fear because she knew a killer and she worried that she would be a victim of that killer? Did she think that possibly her sister would come after her? Or she just in general a scared woman, like all women who live by themselves have fear, or they should have fear, and take measures to lock up their houses and have good lighting and other security measures to protect themselves. But I just, some of the things I read about Emma during her later years at her house that she did, was that because she had a fear that she was in danger? And, did she fear Lizzie? That Lizzie wanted to kill her? Did Lizzie ever say to her, I will do to you what I did to father and stepmother? Because if Lizzie did commit the murder, she would be, you know, a psychopath. She would be able to say something like that and not have any conscience or guilt about it to her sister. I mean, if you can kill your father and stepmother in such a way, why couldn't you kill your sister? And that's another thing I've wondered about, because I think Lizzie killed her parents. If she killed her parents to get the inheritance, it would mean she was pretty cold hearted and psychopathic. So why didn't she also take out Emma to get the other half of the inheritance? And then she'd have it all. But did Lizzie have some special place in her heart for Emma? And she didn't mind splitting the inheritance with Emma? And, or she, if Lizzie was a psychopath, psychopaths use people and need people until they don't need them no more. So did she need Emma, one, to help her get through, you know, being accused? Because maybe Lizzie knew that, she would be looked at, and she needed her sister to help her and protect her and get her through all that. And she wanted, she didn't want to be alone, so she wanted to live with her sister and them have a good life, enjoying their inheritance and, living the kind of life that Lizzie wanted to live before her parents were dead. So I wonder if Emma, when they finally separated and didn't speak to each other anymore, did Emma fear Lizzie? Did she realize that she had killed, or did Lizzie say, I did kill them? Did Lizzie threaten her, or what the deal was? But I do wonder, if Lizzie did kill her parents, why didn't she just off Emma at some point? And maybe she threatened to. Maybe, later in life, Emma got on her nerves, or they got into fights, or, Emma didn't approve of Lizzie's way of life. And some people say that it's because, Lizzie was a lesbian and dating that actress woman or whatever. And some people said that's why Emma left Lizzie, because she didn't approve of her lifestyle. And that could be true, but I think, for sisters, Emma raised Lizzie. For sisters to be, live together that long and to be that close. I mean, they physically lived in the same house. They never, neither one of them got married or whatever. They lived together as children and as adults for so long. Would Emma just totally cut Lizzie out of her life over that and not ever come visit her anymore? It would seem to me that it would have to be something more serious as to why Emma left Lizzie for good and never spoke to her again. At least that's what I've read, that they never spoke to each other again. And people think it's because of Lizzie's lifestyle, or that she was a lesbian and she was, messing around with uh, the female actresses or whatever. But really, and that would be like a big deal back then, or more shocking than it would be today. But really, would Emma care? I mean, her sister was accused and tried for murder. That didn't embarrass her enough to leave her. Would she, because people might find out about or talk about, gossip about her sister dating women, would that make Emma leave her? She may not want to live in the house with her no more if she was morally against same-sex couples, but would she not ever talk to her again, visit with her again, invite her to her home again? I mean, she didn't have to go to Lizzie's home and be friends. So I don't necessarily think that Emma Borden stopped visiting or talking with her sister over her sister possibly having same-sex relationships, I would think that it would have to be something more serious. And I think Pat Brown said something similar to that in her video. But you never know. I mean, obviously, I'm just speculating. I have no proof of anything because I don't know what went on between the sisters when they was in the, behind closed doors in the privacy of their home, or how that went down. Sometimes family members just get annoyed with each other and they don't speak for a lot of reasons. It could have been something, even minor, maybe not nothing to do with Lizzie's lifestyle or the murders or anything. It could just be something stupid because family members get in fights over lots of stupid stuff and, refuse to talk to each other. So I'm just speculating, but it just seems like it would have to be something more serious as to why Emma didn't see the sister who she had been with all of her life, or, since Lizzie was born, and she took care of her, the main caretaker of her after her mother passed away, that she would just suddenly leave her and not see her again for the rest of their lives. So, Emma Borden as a suspect, of course, I think she would make a good suspect because she had a lot to gain. She inherited a lot of money after the deaths of her parents. But she was out of town, and I do believe she really was out of town at the time of the murders, and I don't think that she snuck back in town like Frank Spearing theorizes in his book. Again, his book is called Lizzie, the Story of Lizzie Borden, and that was published in 1984. I don't think she came home from a trip ready with an axe in hand and axed her parents to death. I do think that Lizzie Borden was the one who physically murdered her parents. I just don't know if or when Emma ever knew about it, ever knew conclusively 100% that her sister murdered their parents. So Emma, as a suspect, I don't think she committed the murders. Now, whether she knew about it or not, like I've said, she may have, but I don't think Emma murdered the parents. So I think Emma does make a good suspect. I mean, she has to be looked at. The police had to look at her at the time, make sure her alibi fit or whatever. And they may have suspected that she knew something more than she was saying when they were questioning her. So she makes a good suspect, but I don't think Emma Borden committed the murders. So I disagree with Frank Spearing and others who think that Emma conspired with Lizzie to commit the murders or did commit the murders herself. I think it's more likely that at some point after the murder, she may have realized it or found out or was told by Lizzie or whatever. She may have lied to protect her, but I don't think she knew beforehand about the murders, and I definitely don't think she committed the murders physically herself. Okay, so this is my video about Emma Borden as a suspect. My next video is going to be about Maggie, her real name Bridget Sullivan, the maid, and her possible involvement in the murders. I agree a lot with Pat Brown, the criminal profiler, what she said on her channel in a video she did about Lizzie Borden, that that Maggie would definitely have to know something because she was there. It was only Lizzie and Maggie were the two people in the house at the time. There's no evidence of anybody else being at the house at the time of the murders. So one or both of them would have to know what was going on in that house. And so my next suspect I'm going to talk about will be Maggie, the maid, or Bridget Sullivan. And so that will be the next suspect I will look at.